survived a nightmare on the ninth floor of my apartment building, where a broken safety latch and a father's unconscious grief created a fatal trap for anyone stepping out of the elevator at midnight. My name is Sarah, and as a pediatric night shift nurse living on the fourth floor of the Crestview Apartments, my life revolved around odd hours and heavy physical fatigue. 3 weeks ago, during my standard midnight commute home, the main elevator suddenly overridden its programmed destination and carried me straight up to the dark, unlit ninth floor. The metal doors slid open with a metallic screech, revealing a pitch-black hallway where loose plastic toys and sharp wooden blocks were scattered right across the doorway threshold. I stepped out to clear the obstacle, noticing that the heavy door to apartment 9B was standing wide open, exposing a completely dark interior that smelled strongly of spoiled milk and ozone. I called out into the dark living room to alert the tenant, but the only response was the mechanical clicking of an unplugged baby monitor sitting on a cluttered counter, assuming an absent-minded parent had left their unit unsecured. I pushed the door shut until the lock clicked, swept the scattered plastic blocks away from the elevator track, and returned to my apartment. The next night, at precisely 12:15, the elevator malfunctioned again, overriding my floor selection and dragging the cabin directly back up to the ninth floor. When the doors parted this time, the hallway light fixture had been deliberately unscrewed, leaving the corridor completely dark, except for a trail of heavy iron kitchen tools laid across the elevator sill. I stepped carefully over a heavy skillet left inches from the elevator shaft edge, watching the door to apartment 9B swing open once again on creaking hinges. I approached the threshold and shone my phone flashlight inside, revealing a child's bedroom stripped down to a bare mattress, with wall paint violently scratched away near the baseboards. A tall man suddenly stepped out from the inner hallway in complete darkness, moving with rigid, unnatural steps while staring directly through me with wide, completely unblinking eyes. I backed away into the elevator as he slowly set a heavy metal music box onto the floor, wound the key 3 times, and stood utterly frozen as the high-pitched melody echoed through the empty hall. He did not respond to my voice or acknowledge my presence at all, walking backward into his apartment and pulling the door shut without ever breaking his vacant, glassy stare. I spent the next morning inquiring with the building superintendent, who revealed that the tenant in 9B was Mark, a widowed machinist whose 3-year-old daughter Lily had vanished 4 months prior. The superintendent mentioned that Mark had suffered severe sleep deprivation and neurological trauma following the incident, resulting in severe non-REM sleepwalking episodes that doctors could not control. On the 3rd consecutive night, the elevator once again bypassed the 4th floor, forcing me back up to the 9th floor, where the air was thick with the smell of gas from an open kitchen stove. I sprinted down the narrow hallway toward apartment 9B, finding the front door wide open and Mark standing on the edge of an unstable wooden chair in his living room. He was entirely asleep, holding a heavy glass picture frame over his head, while balance walking along the edge of an open window frame 5 stories above the concrete alleyway. I grabbed his belt from behind and yanked him backward onto the hardwood floor, just as his feet slipped off the slick, painted windowsill. Mark crashed onto the floor beside me, remaining completely unresponsive in his deep, somnambulistic trance, while the unlit gas stove continued to fill the small apartment with dangerous fumes. I scrambled across the dark kitchen to shut off the 4 gas knobs, ventilating the room by throwing open the fire escape window before checking Mark's pulse. While kneeling beside him, I noticed a stack of official police evidence photos and incident reports scattered across his kitchen table beneath a dim, battery-powered lamp. The top report revealed the horrific truth of what had happened 4 months earlier during a sweltering summer afternoon. Mark had returned home exhausted from a 36-hour factory shift, fallen into a profound sleep, and left the main apartment door unlatched while his daughter played nearby. Little Lily had wandered out of the open door, stepped into the hallway, and pushed the glowing button of the aging elevator, which had a defective safety sensor on the outer door track. When the child reached between the closing elevator doors to grab a dropped teddy bear, the faulty emergency sensor failed to trigger, trapping her inside while the heavy cab pulled upward. The mechanical trauma from the unmaintained elevator mechanism killed the 3-year-old girl instantly before anyone in the building realized she had left the apartment. Devastated by overwhelming guilt and severe brain trauma, Mark's mind had locked into a relentless, automatic sleepwalking routine occurring at the exact time of her death. Every night at midnight, his body unconsciously reenacted his frantic search, opening his apartment door, scattering her favorite toys near the elevator, and blocking the doors to stop the machine. As I finished reading the medical coroner's report on the table, a sudden metallic crash echoed from the elevator shaft at the end of the hallway. I rushed back out into the corridor to find Mark standing inside the open elevator cab while still completely asleep, holding a rusted pair of wire cutters in his hand. He had opened the emergency control panel inside the elevator walls, severing the secondary safety brake cables in his sleep state, under the delusion of dismantling the machine that took his daughter. Before I could reach the doors to pull him out, the severed steel cables snapped with a deafening crack, releasing the counterweights inside the dark shaft. I lunged forward and grabbed Mark's arm, but his dead weight pulled us both toward the edge as the cabin floor violently dropped away into the abyss. I managed to brace my boots against the outer door frame, holding onto Mark's shirt with both hands as the elevator car plunged 9 stories down to crash into the basement concrete below. Mark woke up midair, suspended over the empty, pitch-black shaft, looking up into my eyes with sudden, heartbreaking clarity as he realized the full extent of his tragedy. He looked at the framed photograph of his daughter clutched in his left hand, smiled weakly at me through his tears, and deliberately unclasped my grip from his wrist. I watched in absolute horror as he plummeted into the dark pit, ending his unbearable grief in the exact same elevator shaft that had taken his child. His final words echoed up from the darkness just before the violent impact sealed the tragedy forever. One last question. If you were in her place at that moment, would you have done the same? Be honest. What does her choice deserve out of 10? Subscribe now. The best story is coming next.